Well, let's get started, folks. So I'm excited to kick off our second webinar of our Holiday 2021 webinar series. We're joined today by the two gentlemen who run our supply chain or lead the supply chain. We have a whole team behind them, and I'm sure they'll talk about. But the focus today is really what are we doing as Gooten around getting ready for the burgeoning holiday season coming up? We talked a little bit about this briefly with Maddie last week. What can you guys expect as our partners in terms of our production readiness, as well as guidelines around shipping and things to better prepare or prep your customers for, more specifically. So I am lucky to have Andy Nied. There we go. Our head of our supply chain. He runs the entire production and shipping supply chain business for us here at Gooten. And then Andrew Brueckner is our director of logistics. I'll let both of them say hi and explain a little bit more about what they do. But between the two of them, we're really lucky to have them demystify everything that's going on behind the scenes that we don't always see. So Andy, welcome. Andrew, welcome. Andy, do you want to maybe introduce yourself first, and then Andrew, and tell us a little bit about your roles in the company so folks know?
Yeah, Mark, so you said it well, right? So I'm responsible for, the way I put it is I have to deliver on the promises that we make, right? So managing the vendor network, which includes operations of the orders that are in the system, any kind of new product integrations, quality organization, merchandising. We make sure the stuff that we promise we will get delivered gets produced at a very high level of quality. It actually gets delivered when expected. So that's my job in a nutshell. And then AB handles all of the AB. I call him AB. When I hired Andrew, I said, we can't have two Andys on this team, so we're gonna call you AB. AB handles all of our logistics, the actual relationships with our carriers. I'll let him speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so essentially I work with the carriers, the partners, and the vendors just to ensure that the consumer fulfillment or delivery experience meets their expectation and delights the consumer on a daily basis.
Well, AB, I think everyone's going to really be interested in hearing, what that's going to look like this holiday season with all the news out in the marketplace about shipping and shipping challenges. So hopefully you can help us understand what's the reality for this season. So, and speaking of which, there's been a lot in the headlines about what's going on in terms of, supply chain issues and stuff. Andy, can I turn it over to you to kind of tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and, how scared should people be around this? And, what should we take away from all of these kind of crazy headlines?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny when I tell people what I do, even in my own family, right? I'm head of supply chain. For years, it's been, what does that mean exactly? And now we see supply chain is in the news like every day, and the cover of the New York Times, and the White House is talking about supply chain issues and things like that. So it's not the light in which you want to be, get the notice, get the attention. But definitely, I mean, everybody sees it, right? It's in the news. Supply chain issues, kind of globally, up and down, from as high as you can go in the supply chain all the way down through to delivery. So we're in the news for not the best reasons in the supply industry. Everybody's seen the reports around all the ships and outside the port in Los Angeles that are backed up, and other ports around the world. It's a real issue, and so I want to talk a little bit about why is that happening, expand on that a little bit, and then kind of go through what we're seeing in our network, in our vendor network, and then what we're doing about it, and kind of how Gooten positions our partners for success even with these challenges. So if you want to flip to the next slide there, Mark.
Yeah, just quick thing. So I think one quick thought. This though is like when I look at a slide like this just means we're all in it, right? I mean, this is not just like a Gooten problem or a UPS problem. It's like a collective across the entire industry of manufacturing, of shipping, of carriers, of people like ourselves that are helping manage orders and manage production. This is like all of our collective challenge, all the way even to our partners that are here today, right?
Right. It's everywhere, right? It's every industry. I don't think there's any industry not impacted right now. I don't think there's any part of the globe not impacted right now. And things that you don't think necessarily would relate to each other are absolutely relating to each other, right? So shortages in televisions can also be tied to the fact that Ford can't ship any vehicles, right? And that there are all these interconnected pieces that are being exposed right now and stressed by the existing, obviously stressed by the COVID pandemic, but that is having ripples across every single industry out there, restaurants and hotels and everything. So what is happening, right? What is it, right? What's causing all this? I mean, let's take an example. If we go all the way upstream, let's talk about apparel. We do a lot of apparel, decorating for our partners. You talk about even getting the blanks, like getting the actual t-shirts or hoodies. And you go as far upstream as you can go. You go talk about getting like even the fabrics and going further, getting the thread to make the fabric, right? You have COVID outbreaks that are causing capacity issues. You have COVID measures that are in place, like social distancing and things like that, that can reduce the capacity of facilities. You have, even if a factory can produce at 100% capacity, now you have labor shortages caused by a number of things. I don't know if anybody can actually put their finger on exactly what's causing all the labor shortages, but childcare is an issue. The Great Resignation of 2021 is certainly an impact. I think that we have a lot of families around the world who are trying to figure out how to get through this. And so there's a lot less people in the workforce all of a sudden, again, globally, not just here in the US. And all these things kind of roll up into less stuff coming out of the factories, right? All the way upstream. And then that has that knock-on effect. So if you can't produce the thread, you can't produce as much of the actual fabric, you can't produce as much of the actual underlying garment. And then even if you could, you still have the continued kind of rolling effect of impact to freight transportation. So trains and trucks and the shipping industry are all seeing shortages in labor and so therefore shortages in capacity. And then that rolls all the way through to, let's say, when something actually gets to the US ports. As we mentioned before, there's tons of backups right now in the ports on the West Coast of the US, which is receiving a lot of the freight from the Asian markets. And that's exacerbated by a number of things, right? So the ports themselves are running at lower capacity due to COVID restrictions, right? Cleaning restrictions and distancing and things like that. And then there's a massive actual truck driver shortage happening right now as well for all the same reasons. And then there's container and chassis problems where containers and chassis aren't where they need them in the ports. So ports are getting backed up. And then on top of all of that, you add onto it the change in consumer demand, the change in consumer behavior brought on by this, right? So everybody's staying home, working from home, just though the world has changed in the last 18 months, almost 24 months now. And I think that is having this knock-on effect of, on top of all these challenges up and down the supply chain and in the freight industry, you're also having this change in consumer behavior, which is driving more volume, which just exacerbates the problem. And it kind of becomes this vicious cycle. And on top of that, I would say there's also this human behavior. It's kind of related back to like the toilet paper shortage of a year or so ago, right? Like the people know that supply chains are not functioning as they normally do. There are shortages, and so therefore there's hoarding going on. There's I think also just increased demand going on. So it just kind of exacerbates the problem. I was reading an article the other day in the New York Times, I think it was, and they were talking through an example, right? The example was, I just kind of jot down a few notes here. It was, a shipping container can't be unloaded in Los Angeles because too many dock workers are in quarantine. That container then can't be loaded with soybeans in Iowa, right? Then that leaves buyers in Indonesia waiting on a shortage for animal feed, which then has a knock-on effect of that food supply then being impacted. And so there's all these different interconnected pieces that we're dealing with right now. And it's something that's worked well for years, but is now being exposed because of these changes. I'll have the next slide there, Mark. So what are we going to do about it? What are things that we can do? We're talking to all of our manufacturers on a regular basis, of course. We continuously share forecasts with our manufacturers all year long. So it's not something we do only for peak season. We are setting forecasts with our manufacturers constantly. Of course, as we get closer to peak season, we're giving them more updated forecasts and working with that. And we're certainly hearing, what I want to share with you is transparency, right, with what we're hearing in the network. We're dealing with manufacturers here in the US and overseas. It is universal what we're hearing. which is there's definitely, if you're gonna put your finger on one thing that seems to be the biggest issue across the board, it is labor. It is the challenges around finding stable labor, especially during the holiday seasons, our traditional holiday peak season. A lot of our manufacturers rely on temporary workforces, and it's harder to get those temporary workforces now. I think most of them have really good plans in place. Like what we work with them on is, okay, well, we understand that. What are we doing about it? We have thoughts on best practices on what you should be doing based on our experiences, and we're working with those. Most of our manufacturers are really good and very mature and sophisticated and have those really good plans in place. Others maybe less so, and we're working with them on making sure that they have good plans in place to mitigate that, right? Like, yes, temporary agency one may not be able to give you what you need, but you need to have 2 or 3 or 4, right? Make sure you have backups and redundancies and things like that. But labor is definitely a theme. And then I would say also materials. Hit and miss. I think different industries are calling out different things. The big thing that we're pushing on is making sure that our manufacturers have clear to build, right? That we make sure that our manufacturers have what they need to execute peak season on hand. If there's still stuff that's on the water coming from, Asia somewhere, that may not get here. And so what are we going to do about that? And do you have enough on hand to get through what you need to get through for peak? And the answer for the vast majority of our manufacturers is yes, they have what they need. This is not new, right? This issue, everybody's been kind of seeing it coming. Most of our manufacturers have bought supplies they need for this holiday season back in April, May, right? To be way ahead of it and to get on hand what they need. And now they're just doing micro adjustments to get what they need. So by and large, on the large quantity items, we're good to go. And people are doing the right things. Next slide, Mark. So this is really just talking about what's the e-commerce trends, right? There is this COVID pandemic is definitely a sea change type event. I think we all know that. It's changed a lot of things, I think, temporarily, and there's going to be a lot of things I think that are more permanent. And I think one of those things that is more permanent is the e-commerce trend. The move from brick and mortar towards e-commerce is only going to accelerate and deepen. And I think that is a one-way road. I don't think that goes back the other direction in any kind of significant way. So, there is a push towards e-commerce. It's great for all of us on the phone who are e-commerce merchants and e-commerce and related to the e-commerce industry. But it does, again, exacerbate kind of the issues we're talking about. Next slide, Mark. So a bit more about what we're doing. I think just fundamentally, one of the biggest things about what Gooten is doing is our model, just by its very nature, does a lot to mitigate the risk, right? We are not one sole manufacturer in one facility in the middle of America who is relying on one supplier to get us the things that we need. We have multiple manufacturers for almost every single thing that we do, multiples deep, right? And redundancy for everything. And those manufacturers don't rely on one single mill or one single supplier to get them what they need, right? So we have good distribution in our network across geographically, and we have very good coverage from even the suppliers and the actual manufacturers of some of the underlying products that are required to make our goods. So just the nature of Gooten by our very nature is a big step towards mitigating this. As I mentioned before, we are working with our manufacturers all year long on forecast. We have meetings with them on a regular basis. We've reviewed all of our forecasts with them about what we expect, and are there plans in place to manage the capacity that we need, and do they have the good redundancy plans in place and mitigation plans in place across all of our entire network. And that's been going on for months now, right? So it's not something we're dealing with just here in October. We've seen it coming, of course, and have been working with them all summer long to make sure we're ready to go. And we also make sure that, and actually that's what we're doing here in this hotel where AB and I are, we're meeting with the operations team, the supply chain team, one last time ahead of peak in person to make sure that we have all the questions asked and answered that we need, and that we have good contingency plans in place. So if something happens here, what are we going to do? What's the playbook that we pull out so that you as a merchant would never even know that it's happening, right? We have the ability to reroute work if manufacturer A runs into problems, they have a COVID outbreak and go to 50% capacity, we have the ability to move that work other places and keep it going, right? And that's, to me, again, the advantage of having the distributed model that we have. Also, we spend a lot of time talking with our carriers. So, the UPSs of the world, United Postal Service, United States Postal Service, DHL, and others. And AB is going to talk a bit about that. We've been working with them on cutoff dates and trying to make sure that we are giving you good guidance on when to make sure you're communicating cutoffs to ensure on-time delivery ahead of the holidays. AB can take it from here for a few slides.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, so one of the things we do here at Gooten is we work with our vendor team and the carrier teams to really understand, how best can we recommend that our partners go through peak in terms of order deadlines. And when I say deadlines, I probably should call them more guidelines, because while our vendors certainly know and feel confident in their production times, the carriers this year are giving guidelines, but they're not giving firm guidelines. And they've also removed any type of carrier guarantees that come along with their shipments or deliveries and services they offer. So that does provide some challenges, but we have put together a suggested order guideline or deadline. And to just kind of review at a very high level with those, we're suggesting that really for international orders that are going to be traveling, or being shipped internationally, really that deadline or guideline, I'll say again, is really the December 1st time frame. For expedited orders, you're looking at right around December 15th. For standard orders, right around the 15th. For expedited orders, right around the 18th. And then for overnight orders, around the standard the 15th. Let's restart this. I apologize, folks. So for international orders, the guideline is December 1st. For standard is the 12th of December. For expedited is the 15th of December, and overnight is the 18th. I apologize. But really, like I said, we've worked with vendors and with carriers, and these are the dates that we are very confident in that we can have a successful holiday peak season, and we can, fulfill certainly the recommendations and what the expectation is of the consumers within e-commerce. You can go to the next slide, Mark.
Hey, just a quick question, AB, on this.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, so does this mean, like in the case of, like, say, standard, where you have December 12th, does that mean if I got an order in by December 12th, I have a fairly good chance that it'll arrive in time for Christmas? Or I guess, could you just clarify what those guideline deadline kind of dates actually mean? It's like my orders have to be in on that date at the absolute latest kind of thing, or how do you?
Right. So we recommend that those deadlines or guidelines are when the orders are submitted. And, that gives our vendors the ability and time needed to produce during the peak season. And then also the carriers and all of, the anomalies that go into shipping. We've worked with the carriers to say, knowing what we know from last year and from what we anticipate this year, what are you recommending? And, the carriers, they want to be efficient, they want to be effective, but, just like last year and other years around peak, there are things that happen that you just can't plan for. And, they do their best, but certainly we feel that if you submit an order by these timeframes, it's going to be a good peak season.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify if it was like had to be shipped by then, or it was in the queue for production, then shipping by those dates. So that's key. So thank you for clarifying.
Perfect. Yep. And then the next slide really is, what are we dealing with, or what are partners, what are consumers, expected to deal with during this peak season? Obviously, for shippers, for vendors, partners, the shipping costs have gone up over the last 2 or 3 years with the rise of e-commerce. The carriers, taking on more and more responsibility, more and more costs. But really, surcharges are something that is unexpected to the consumer. They get used to paying a certain shipment cost throughout the year, or price of good. But surcharges lift that cost and raise that cost. And a lot of partners and a lot of e-commerce companies are having to turn, and where they were once eating shipping costs, they are having to start passing those costs along to the consumer. So yeah, that certainly raises a question, for consumers when it comes time to having their package or shipment fulfilled, and isn't meeting that expectation. Well, part of that cost has been passed on to them, so they feel like they are paying for that type of service. And then the other, another couple other things is, like I mentioned before, first of all, there's no guarantees, with the carriers again this year. They're doing their best, and they're still working through the challenges of COVID and those, but also peak season presents its own unique challenges every year. So, I think the important thing for partners to remember this year and other e-commerce shippers is communicate to the consumer. Let them know what the expectation is. Let them know, how it is best that they will be able to have their orders or fulfilled. But then keep that communication going. If there are delays, if there are challenges, just make sure that the consumer is aware of those. And then I would also recommend partners stay up to date on what's going on with the carriers. Whether it's UPS, FedEx, USPS, generally, they all give great information. We can also be relied on to give great information in terms of what's going on with any type of delays or challenges that there may be. So the best news is that while some are predicting a very challenging shipping season, there are certainly signs that the carriers have done what they need to do to prepare for it, and that there are signs that the ship again 2 that is expected may be a little bit better than people thought. So, and then changes that are coming in the shipping world. Most recently, LaserShip and OnTrack, 2 regional carriers, have partnered together. While that may not mean a lot of capacity alleviation for some shippers this year, it does give hope to shippers and e-commerce companies and partners that in the future, more and more options will become available. And some of these capacity issues and challenges like costs, surcharges, things like that, may become more competitive and level out a little bit in years to come.
Great stuff. A couple just follow-ups. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think one of the keys is that the reason why I think I'll say we have you on our team is you're constantly monitoring everything that's going on with shipping, and I certainly know that as you find or see issues, you'll surface that, and we'll make sure that we communicate that out to partners to know what's going on or if there's issues or things like that. So I think hopefully that is key for our partners to hear that, like, we're going to get information and we're just going to pass it straight through to them as well.
Mark, that's a great point. And one of the things, we talk to the carriers and the vendors every day or during peak. And so, we're not just relying on one source to tell us what's happening. We're talking to the carriers, but we're also asking our vendors, what are you seeing pick up? What's the experience today? What was picked up today? And so, like I said, I feel like we're doing as much as we can, and certainly being proactive with the kind of communication patterns that we're setting up going forward.
Yeah. That's great. Last year, I guess we heard stories of like UPS or FedEx just wouldn't go to pick up packages at manufacturers. Do you see that occurring again this year, or do we feel like the carriers are better positioned this year to be able to at least pick up the packages and not just completely avoid places? What's your sort of hedge on that, do you think?
Great question, Mark. I think we're prepared better this year than last year. I do think that the challenge this year will be revealed after Thanksgiving, meaning that I think that a lot of people are being warned that there may be challenges this year. A lot of e-commerce companies you're seeing start Christmas sales and that already. Right. I was just joking the other day that the old adage, Christmas in July, is going to become true, here pretty soon if gains aren't made. But I think that things are going to be better this year. I think that any type of challenges we may see will likely show up, post Thanksgiving. But again, the carriers are better prepared. I think they learned a lot about maybe some labor issues that they hadn't had to deal with in the past. And if there's going to be challenges from the carriers this year, unfortunately, it'll likely be labor issues that cause it.
Got it. One more question, maybe for both of you guys,
Yeah.
before we go to the kind of summary slide. Are you already seeing any ramp sort of differential in orders? Like, I know we've been trying to get the word out to get people to place orders earlier and sooner. Are you guys already noticing it within the production and shipping environment? Or are we still waiting to see some of that come in?
Yeah, I think that generally we're still waiting, Mark. I know there's definitely an effort there underway to educate people that, earlier is better overall, right? It's part of what this webinar is about, right? But
Yeah.
I think we're not seeing much difference year over year yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So we got to keep letting people know. So
Yeah.
we'll make sure we do that. Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
All right. Some takeaways here.
Yeah. Yeah. So what can we take away from this? I do think that this is my 13th or 14th print on demand peak season, I think. And we can have all the plans in the world, we can do all the preparations in the world. Things are still going to happen that are out of our control. And by our, I mean the collective our, right? Manufacturers, suppliers, everybody. And it's the Murphy's Law, right? If it can go wrong, it's going to go wrong. And it's going to go wrong at the worst possible time for the worst possible order. Those things happen. We know that. It reminds me of the Mike Tyson quote, right? Everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. So what can we do about it, right? I do think that planning early and pushing early as much as we can. Like, I've already started receiving emails from different e-commerce stores that I buy from, saying, order now. As much as we can do, I think collectively, to try to pull work forward, I think that'd be great. I know that's wishful thinking, probably. Consumer behavior is what it is. But if there's ways for our merchants to incentivize their customers to get orders in, I think that'd be very helpful. And even if we're moving just a few percentage points of work out of the peak couple weeks into mid-November or early November, it's going to be helpful, right? The more we can get off of, the more we can lower that peak height down is only going to be helpful overall, whether it's a shipping issue, whether it's a manufacturing issue. So certainly, as much as we can pull forward would be great. I think planning for the disruption, understand there's going to be delays, and having patience with that, I think would be great. And as much as we can communicate with the end customers would be good about what to expect this holiday season, and be flexible. I think, again, it's know that there's going to probably be some things that happen. Know that we've got really good plans in place to mitigate those things, but if things were if we were to come back to you and say, would you accept this versus that may happen, right? On certain things, this black shirt instead of that black shirt. And I would say also monitor your inbox and your notifications from Gooten, right? I'm sure that Mark and his team are gonna be very busy during peak season. We're gonna be as transparent as we can be when we see things that we can pass through and pass along to you so that you're as informed as we are. We are gonna do that. So please pay attention to those and reach out if you have questions about it. But plan for the worst, hope for the best, and I think expect there to be some bumps along the way, I guess would be my biggest takeaway. That's it. Next slide, Mark.
Yeah, before we move to close here, Andy, a quick question for you. I know you talked about redundancy a little bit a few slides ago. Can you guys maybe just go into a little bit more detail as to what that means and sort of how that's going to operate for our partners so that we, smooth things out for them? And so
sure. So behind the scenes, right? So when you send through an order for, let's just stay on the whole t-shirt example. We have systems in the back end that route that work to one of multiple manufacturers who could decorate that for us, right? So it's multiple deep for most of our products, and we're trying to route that based on a number of variables, mostly around capability, inventory, and location. So try to get it produce as close to where it needs to go as possible to save on time in transit. So we have redundancy there. So again, if one of those, if the most ideal location were to go down for whatever reason, without you knowing it, we would route that work to someone else, and it would get done. And then perhaps it ships from Oregon instead of Los Angeles to go to Arizona or something like that. But mostly uneventful or unnoticeable to you. And then even beyond that, the next level down, within those manufacturers, what we try to do is make sure that if they have good stock of a specific t-shirt, let's say as an example, that there are good substitutions in place for that t-shirt as well. So even within that primary manufacturer, if they don't have that one shirt for whatever reason, do they have another one that's just like it that would be just as good that we could go to? So we try to have multiple paths to deliver what we need to get to, right? Our plan is with as little disruption as possible to your businesses that we get things delivered to you as quickly as possible during peak season.
Great, thanks. I think that covers most of it for today, guys. So obviously, thank you guys for joining and sharing some of your insights. I know you guys have a lot of planning going on behind the scenes and your daily stand-ups and everything, and you guys are monitoring this like crazy. So obviously your job is incredibly important coming up over the next weeks and so on to help make sure people get their items produced and shipped and delivered to loved ones and so on. So thank you guys for taking a little bit of your day to share with our partners and get them up and running. And hopefully, if they have any questions, they could reach out to us and we'll funnel them back to you guys to help us get them answered. For everyone tuning in, thanks for tuning in. As always, we're going to have a webinar every week. So next Wednesday, we have Mark Ray from our customer support team coming in to talk about customer service, customer experience preparations that you can make. As always, you can reach out to us on the marketing team, marketing@gooten.com, and check out our ongoing updates to our holiday 2021 webpage. So gooten.com/holiday-2021 has all the updates on shipping times and all the stuff that AB covered in terms of guidelines for getting orders in place based off of the different shipping methods and so on, all the resources that we can provide you and so on. And with that, guys, thanks again for tuning in. Folks out there, our partners, thanks for being a Gooten partner. Hopefully you have a great holiday season. Let us know how else we can help you, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.